UFC Fight Night, Robert Whittaker versus Ikram Aliskerov this Saturday from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Yes, the UFC has finally made their way over to Saudi Arabia, and you got Robert Whittaker and Ikram Aliskerov in the main event. Again, originally supposed to be Robert Whittaker taking on Khamzat Chimaev. Chimaev has pulled out. Whittaker now gets Aliskerov instead. Now, before we get into the video, I'm recording this on early Friday morning, so if anything has changed with this card up until when this video comes out on Sunday, I will have a detailed prediction in the description down below. If the main event changes, this will likely be a separate video. But again, Aliskerov and Whittaker for now in the main event. I'm assuming that that's what this fight is going to be. And again, it's a good fight. Aliskerov pulling out, obviously he's not fighting Tricoli anymore on that card with Perez and Tyra in the main event. Now he steps in on short notice to get this fight over in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And folks, if you haven't yet though, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for some more UFC and MMA picks here on the channel weekly. Tomorrow we will have our PFL regular season event number 5 predictions with the lightweights and the light heavyweights. The main event, Clay Collard taking on Mads Burnell. In the co-main event, you've got Impa Kasanganay, the PFL light heavyweight champion in 2023, taking on the 2023 PFL Europe champion in Jacob Netto. That's what we have going on for you tomorrow on the channel. Last week on the PFL, we went 10-1 on the predictions. That's pretty good if I do say so myself. Okay, we're starting things off with the road to the UFC finals in the bantamweight division between Long Xiao and Chang Ho Lee. You got 26-8 Long Xiao coming into this fight off of 2 wins in the road to the UFC in 2023, and this fight has been scheduled twice. At the end of 2023 in December, originally on that Song Yadong Chris Gutierrez card that the UFC was supposed to have in China. Then it was booked again for a UFC Fight Night or road to the UFC in February in the Apex. They were both canceled, and now we have settled on this day for the finale for the road to the UFC between, again, the Chinese fighter in Long Xiao and the Korean in Chang Ho Lee. Chang Ho Lee is 9-1. He's 1-0 in one championship, if that means anything. That fight was only back in 2019. What has he done since then? He's gone on to win in various promotions, had a fight in Brave that he lost in 2022, won in a promotion called Black Combat Champions League against a 1-0 fighter, won twice on the road to the UFC against an 11-1 Rana Singh and a 7-0 fighter by TKO in the 3rd round. He is getting, though, the much more experienced Long Xiao in this fight. Xiao is another guy who's had experience in one championship before. He did lose his fight in one championship. Got to go all the way back, though, when he fought in one championship to 2016. Not really, again, that fight doesn't really mean all that much. The fight that does mean something, though, is his loss to Christian Quinones, losing the fight by unanimous decision on the Contender Series. Quinones, obviously a UFC fighter who's now 1-2. Long Xiao losing the fight by decision. Given that fight was 3 years ago, does kind of give you somewhat of a gauge of where Long Xiao is where he's at right now. He won in WLF a couple times after that. He's a guy who fought a lot in WLF wars. Back-to-back wins in road to the UFC, but both by decision and both very close fights. When you look at those fights specifically, again, Long Xiao is the one striking. He's the one trying to keep his opponents on the feet. For Chang Ho Lee, again, this is a guy who's going to come in there, he's going to mix it up with you. He pitched an absolute shutout in his first road to the UFC fight against Rana Singh, 35-0 on the significant strike count. Again, a complete shutout by Chang Ho Lee in that fight. He took the fight down and he absolutely dominated from there. I think the wrestling game of Chang Ho Lee, is going to give Long Xiao some problems in this one. Yeah, when you look at Long Xiao's record, you've got 9 submission victories in the past. You've got 4 by knockout and 13 by decision. But I think when you match him up against a guy who is at the wrestling prowess of Chang Ho Lee, I think it does give a guy like Long Xiao some problems. And it's interesting because Long Xiao, again, 26-8, he's 26 years old. Again, all those fights, only 26 is crazy. Chang Ho Lee, 10 professional fights at 30 years of age. I am going to take, though, the older fighter, not the more experienced fighter, but the older fighter in Chang Ho Lee to go out here and win this fight. And I think he does get it done by 2nd round TKO. I think, again, it's going to be a finish on the ground. I think Chang Ho Lee's going to use his wrestling really effectively in this fight, like we have seen him do so far on the road to the UFC. When you look at his last fight, again, it is another finish on the ground for him in that win against, I'm not even going to try to pronounce this guy's name, Zuapasi. Again, it is it's a grinding type fight. He loses the first round. He gets taken down and held down in that first round. The second round, Chang Ho Lee is coming back. You can make the case he loses that round. The third round, he really starts to turn it up and he wins it. Again, getting the finish at the end of that third with a minute left to go. Not to the same extent, say a fighter like Liz Carmouche just did. I'm just recording this after the PFL card against Kana Watanabe. Again, she was down 2-0, got the armbar. It wasn't to that same extent, but still, Chang Ho Lee needed the win in the third round, and he was able to go in there and get the finish again with that TKO. Again, I really like what he's able to do with the wrestling. I like the cardio. He's shown that even in fights like, again, his last fight in Road to UFC, when he's down, he can come back and he can still win the fight. I think he's able to beat Long Xiao. I do like, again, all around what we have out of Chang Ho Lee more than Xiao. Again, I know Xiao's got more experience, but when you look at both these guys, again, Chang Ho Lee fought a lot more impressively on the road to the UFC compared to Long Xiao. I think Chang Ho Lee does get it done, and we are going to take him to win this fight by second round TKO. Let's go on to our next one here. You've got Cedric Dumas coming in on short notice in replacement of Abu Azaitar to take on Denis Tiuliulin, who is 11-9. And again, that kind of just, you know, screams at you a little bit. It comes off the board. Again, you have a fighter who is 11-9. No offense and no disrespect. This is a type of record you would see for a women's MMA fighter. It just is. This is a Courtney Casey type record. Seriously, it is, right? 11-9, that's kind of what you would expect. Denis Tiuliulin's a guy who's 1-4 in the UFC. I'll be honest with you, I don't know why he's still around. I just don't. I don't know why he's still even in the UFC. It was an interesting fight, don't get me wrong, with Abu Azaitar. I thought it was very interesting because, again, Azaitar hasn't really been the same guy, and again, he's, you know, Azaitar's not the greatest. Now, Cedric Dumas, for as bad as he has looked in the past, is a guy who has beat Abu Azaitar before. And again, I've never been impressed in particular with Cedric Dumas. I'll just be completely honest with you. I was not impressed in the Josh Fremen fight where he got submitted. Obviously, he got poked in the eye a couple times against Nurulstan Ruzboyev where he ended up losing in Atlantic City. That's not his fault, but still, he was not, I've never been the most impressed with Dumas. The most impressed I've been with the guy was when he fought back in Icon, and he was like the guy that they kind of built that George Masvidal era of Icon FC around, when he was winning those fights by head kick and finish really early, or even when he got the main event spot against Aaron Highbaugh. That's when I was more impressed with Dumas. Now, again, he just feels like another guy to me. I do like his striking. Again, Dumas has shown the wrestling capability as well. It is in the bag, but in this fight, again, it everywhere should scream off, again, Cedric Dumas should be able to have his way, whether it be on the ground or whether it be on the feet too. Again, Dumas does have the ground game, and Denis Tiuliulin is so bad down there. 4 losses by submission so far, and again, you look at every single fight he's had in the UFC. Alisab Khizraev was able to get him down and submit him in the second round. The Jamie Pickett fight he won, he was able to dominate Pickett on the feet. That's the one spot Tiuliulin can get you against the guy who's not the best striker like Pickett. But still, I'd take Cedric Dumas in a striking fight over Denis Tiuliulin. And then he loses to Junior Park, he gets taken down. Gregory Rodriguez takes him down and elbows the absolute living hell out of him on that card in Boston. And then Christian Leroy Duncan knocks him down and finishes him in the second round. Again, everything points to a Cedric Dumas finish in this fight, and really, it's whatever way he wants to win it. That's kind of how I feel about this fight. I think it's really one-sided. I think Dumas is the way better fighter in this one, and I understand he's taken it on short notice, but I'm just not impressed with Denis Tiuliulin at all. I'm going to take Cedric Dumas to win the fight by first-round knockout. Again, it will be Dumas' first finish in the UFC. I understand that, but the guy has knockout capability. I have seen this guy go into Icon before, and I've seen him just totally melt guys. Again, go watch the DeWitt Jackson fight back on the first George Masvidal ran Icon FC card. It's on Fight Pass. He goes in there, he head kicks the guy in the first round. It's a fight that actually wasn't even, promoted going into the card. Like, it wasn't even on the fight card. I remember on Tapology, it's just, this guy, Cedric SD Dumas at the time, was on the card, and he ended up winning by first round knockout. So I've always, again, kind of had my eye on Dumas since that point. And yes, I haven't been too impressed so far in the UFC, but this is really the fight where he can go out there and just put on a very good performance and put his name back on the map. Because again, this is a fight that let's just be honest, he's been gifted the Denis Tiuliulin fight. Guys want this fight because it's a way to get a highlight reel knockout against a 36-year-old Russian who's 11-9. Guys, Tiuliulin's not very good. Cedric Dumas is going to dominate. Give me Pensacola, Florida's own Cedric Dumas to win the fight by first round knockout. Let's go into our next one here. Very interesting fight in the bantamweight division. You've got Farid Basharat taking on Montel Jackson. Montel Jackson is 7-2 in the UFC. It's hard. It truly is to get a record like that. It just is. Again, you to the point where you're having 9 fights in the UFC, you're not fighting scrubs anymore. Montel Jackson is coming off some interesting wins. His last win is Hani Yahya. Now, again, Hani Yahya in 2023 is not the best victory, but Montel Jackson has done everything that's been asked of him so far in the UFC. He goes in there, he knocks out Hani Yahya in the first round. That's exactly what's been asked out of him. The fight before that, he beat Tiuliulin by decision. He knocks down JP Buys 4 times in their fight in 2021. He wins. He knocks out Jesse Strader before that. Montel Jackson, the problem I have with him has not been tested. Now, I was super excited to see him against Chris Gutierrez at one point in time. Obviously, that fight fell through. Then he was supposed to fight Said Nurmagomedov on this card. I was excited for that. Said pulled out the fight. And now you get him versus Farid Basharat, which is it is just a different stylistic matchup because Farid Basharat is going to be in your face all night and he's going to try to grapple with you. It's that simple. He wants to wrestle and he wants to, again, get the fight on the ground and just fight this grueling type of fight on the mat the entire fight. And that's going to be tough, I think, to a certain extent for Montel Jackson. I like Montel Jackson a lot. I truly do. I think this guy's got a lot of power for the 135-pound weight division. Again, the nickname speaks for itself. He is quick, and he's gotten a knockdown in every single fight he's had in the UFC since pre-pandemic. That's, again, the streak Montel Jackson has been on in terms of getting knockdowns. Again, he had 1 against Hani Yahya, 1 against Arce, 4 against Buys, 2 against Strader, 1 in a loss against Brett Johns on Fight Island, and 1 against Felipe Colares back in 2028, I believe in Raleigh, North Carolina. Shout out to Raleigh. NC State's on the map right now. Hell. Final 4, women's, men's. They're in the College World Series now. Crazy. I thought I'd just give DJ Burns. I love that dude. Anyways, I don't even know if Blaise Dos Santos was in Raleigh. That might have been in Nashville. I should probably check that right now. That fight card, it was in Raleigh, so at least I got that right. Anyways, Montel Jackson's good, right? The guy's very good. He's got a lot of power, especially for 135. He's pretty big for the weight class too, 5'10", but the reach is really what, again, makes Montel Jackson dangerous at this weight class. A 76-inch reach for 135 pounds is pretty good. He's going to have a 5-inch reach advantage on Farid Basharat. Now, again, the fight, though, just changes when you're fighting a guy like Basharat, who is going to be constantly giving you hell with his ground game. Can Montel Jackson stay away from that? I don't know. Because the way Montel Jackson's lost fights so far in the UFC has been exactly that. It's been him getting out-grappled. Look at the fight against Ricky Simone. Look at the fight against Brett Johns. Those are the 2 fights he's lost in his professional mixed martial arts career, and they've both kind of gone the same way. He got out-grappled. He won the fight on the feet, but he just purely got out-wrestled. That's where I'm scared about him fighting Farid Basharat. I think he beats him on the feet, but it's just a matter of, does he keep the fight on the feet? Ultimately, I don't think he does, and I think it's very tough, but I do think Basharat wins. I'm taking Farid Basharat to win the fight by unanimous decision. Again, it's going to be a wrestling-heavy approach. I want Montel Jackson to win. Don't get me wrong. I really want Jackson to do it. But Basharat, again, this is an undefeated guy who's given some, he's given Taylor Leiblu's trouble. He beat him by decision. He submitted Clayton Rodriguez. He fought a guy who's a very, very credentialed grappler as well in Damone Blackshear back at UFC 285. Grounded him, won that fight. Again, Basharat's undefeated in the UFC, and he's just truly a tough guy to beat, I think. Again, it's going to take a very good defensive wrestler to beat this guy. And again, the way you're going to beat him, you're going to beat him by keeping the fight on the feet and just outboxing him, right? I think, again, Basharat does beat Montel Jackson. I want Jackson to win. He's going to have to keep his reach, though. He's going to have to keep his length in this fight. He's going to have to just, again, keep Basharat away the entire fight. But that's a lot easier said than done. Basharat's going to come to wrestle, and he's going to give Jackson a lot of problems. So give me Farid Basharat to win the fight by unanimous decision. As we go into our next one here, I could not get a picture of Magomed Gadzhiyasulov for the life of me. So it is what it is. He's taking on Bredson Ribeiro. Now, Gadzhiyasulov, I'm probably butchering the name, kind of came out of nowhere for me. I wasn't familiar with him prior to the Contender Series. He kind of came out of nowhere. He randomly showed up on Brave. He fought once on Eagle FC. He won, but he kind of just randomly showed up. Right, he won on Brave, he won by decision, then he beat Jose Medina by unanimous decision on the Contender Series. That's a fighter coming out of the country of Bolivia. He beat him by decision, that's great. If you look though at Medina, this guy was not very good coming into the Contender Series. He's beating guys who was 11-12. He's beating 4-2 fighters, 0-2. Like, he was not beating anybody special. It was a fight that Gadzhiyasulov was supposed to win, and he did exactly that. He's a minus 850 favorite. Again, this is a guy fighting out of Makhachkala, Dagestan. It's not the Habib camp in Dagestan. It's the other one. It's still a very highly credentialed though camp in Dagestan. And again, this is a heavy Sambo guy. He's going to come in there. He's looking to wrestle. It's a stylistically horrible matchup for Brunson Ribeiro. It just is. Now, I would think any matchup right now is a bad matchup for Brunson Ribeiro. If you go back and watch his fight against Mingyang Zhang, he loses the fight by knockout in the first round. It's a war. For the minute and 41 seconds that fight is contested, it is a war. Those guys go back and forth in the feet. It's a very interesting fight. Again, though, Zhang catches him, though, before Ribeiro really lands a big shot. And again, Ribeiro's got the striking game. He's a very good striker who can give a lot of guys problems. The problem is, Magomed Gadzhiyasulov is not looking to strike. He is going to be wrestling right up the gates. And that's where it's difficult for Brunson Ribeiro. And again, on top of this, if Brunson Ribeiro was fighting literally anybody, I would still think there's a problem because the guy got knocked out 3 months ago, right? The brain needs time to heal. I say this all the time. At least 6 months. When a guy gets knocked out, I want to see at least 6 months of inactivity before you turn it right back again. Turn it right around, right? You want to see at least 6 months. And that's what, personally, I have a problem with some of these guys in the PFL fighting so quickly, but I understand it. It's their season format. But again, it favors guys who win and don't take a lot of damage. Obviously, that's how the season's supposed to work. So that's why, again, sometimes when you get PFL fights and you see a guy, I'm going to use Jakub Neto, for example. He's going to fight Impa Kasanganay very soon, right? And we're going to talk about that fight tomorrow on the channel. So again, stay tuned to the channel and go watch that video tomorrow, right? But Jakub Neto, PFL Europe champion, is fighting Impa Kasanganay, this week on Friday in Salt Lake City. I'm going to talk about that fight tomorrow. But this is kind of a preview to that breakdown to this fight. And trust me, it applies to the Brunson Ribeiro fight. He just got knocked out by Duvaljan Yagashidamirov literally 2 months ago. He got knocked out in the first round to Neto. Now he's taking on the hardest punching guy in the weight class, in my opinion, in Impa Kasanganay. What do you think's going to happen? Right, Neto's turning around because he needs, because again, if he's somehow able to knock out Impa in the first round, he probably still doesn't make the playoffs, but still, if he's able to knock out Impa in a minute, then boom, you're right back in it, and you can be in the playoffs to win $1 million. Okay, but that's the season format, and that's why I don't like it, and that's why, again, I like the season, but I don't like guys turning around that quickly, and that's why there's some picks that you can make with PFL, and you can just see, well, this guy just got knocked out 2 months ago. He's probably going to get fed right to the wolves. Obviously, that's what that's happening to him. He's getting fed right to Impa Kasanganay, the world champion, who hits very hard, just knocked out Polizzi in his last fight. Like, again, that's what you kind of expect to happen. Now, again, Gadzhiyasulov is not the type of guy that I don't think is just going to stand there and say, all right, let's, point down, let's trade with Ribeiro. I don't think that happens. I think he takes Ribeiro down. I think he gives him problems down there too. But for a little bit of insurance in this pick, we're going to take Gadzhiyasulov to win the fight by first round TKO. Now, again, you pick first round TKO, that can mean a first round knockout too. I don't think he's going to stand with Ribeiro. He does not have the striking he does not have the striking skills to do so. It would be very stupid of him. Again, seriously, it would be very dumb if Gadzhiyasulov struck with Ribeiro. It's always in the back of my mind though, his chin is very compromised since just losing 3 months ago. So that's the one thing we can fall back on if Gadzhiyasulov is somehow stupid enough not to wrestle, because he has a very clear advantage on the ground. But if he's stupid enough to strike, it's always there too, because Ribeiro just got knocked out. Again, I would still take Ribeiro in a straight kickboxing bout against Gadzhiyasulov. I would. But Gadzhiyasulov is going to wrestle him, and he's going to give him a lot of trouble down there. I think he's going to win by ground and pound on the ground. That's kind of what he does. He gets guys down. He really just works his ground and pound. And he, again, just pummels them to victory. Give me Magomed Gadzhiyasulov to win the fight by first round TKO. As we keep going, we move on to our next one here. Fakhretdinov taking on Nicholas Dalby in the welterweight division. So for Hanat, right, he's coming off his draw in his last fight against Aliskerov dos Santos. It's a draw in Brazil by majority. It's a majority decision draw. Okay. That's not the guy it's not the guy I thought he was. I thought he was going to go out there and just beat the brakes off Aliskerov dos Santos. He didn't. He was in real trouble in that third round. It is what it is, right? He fought well in the first. The second was and the third round, it really started to fall apart for Fakhretdinov. He was, trying just to survive out there. Now, he's fighting a 39-year-old Nicholas Dalby. Now, Again, Nicholas Dalby surprised me in his last fight when he won against Gabriel Bonfim. I don't think anybody saw that happening, but it happened. And now, again, you have to respect the guy and give him a very tough matchup in Fakhretdinov. Because seriously, if Dalby wins this fight, this is, again, the guy's coming back into the top 15. You can't deny him a top 15 fight if he beats Fakhretdinov here. Hanat's good. Again, you saw how easily he was able to just dismantle Kevin Lee. And again, you look at his wins in the UFC and you're kind of thinking, how did he draw Aliskerov dos Santos? Seriously, because you look, he beats Brian Battle. Brian Battle's very good. He beat Brian Battle and just dominated him on the ground. Brian Battle had 3 significant strikes in that entire fight. And then he beats Kevin Lee after that. He beats him by guillotine in 55 seconds, puts Kevin Lee to sleep. And then he's got the draw against Aliskerov dos Santos. Again, don't forget the win over Andreas Michailidis in his UFC debut. Again, Fakhretdinov and Alex Pereira have both beat the same guy in their UFC debut. But again, Hanat does exactly that. He wrestles and he tries to get submissions on the ground. That's what he does. I think it's a tough fight for Nicholas Dalby. It just is. And again, like, he was able to keep Gabriel Bonfim on the feet, and he gave him a lot of trouble. And that's kind of how Dalby fights, right? He wants to keep fights standing, and he just wants to get in that brawl. Again, it's kind of a stereotype I give these older fighters, but it kind of just is. That's what Dalby kind of is. He wants to stand and bang for the most part, and he's more than willing to engage in that style of fight. Don't forget he beat Daniel Rodriguez in 2020. I don't think he really won that fight, but he did, right? D-Rod's on this card later. We're going to talk about him versus Kelvin Gastelum. But Dalby, again, I think you want to look at a good Nicholas Dalby performance, watch the Warlley Alves fight. Don't watch the Jesse Ronson fight. That fight was horrible. But, like, watch him against Warlley Alves, even watching him against Muslim Salikov, right? Like, again, he's able to keep fights standing, and he's able just to brawl. He dropped Bonfim and finished Bonfim in the second round. I just don't think he's able to do that against Fakhretdinov, a guy who gives guys trouble on the ground. If he can just put together a good 15 minutes in this fight, he will win pretty decisively, and I feel pretty good in picking that. Again, we're going to take the Russian. Fakhretdinov is 7 years younger than Nicholas Dalby. Again, we're kind of waiting on Dalby just to slowly fall off that hill. I thought we were going to truly get there in that main card bout in Brazil against Bonfim. We didn't. This is the fight again. We kind of put him out on the... I probably butchered my mic right there. I kicked the cord. But anyways, that's the fight. This is the fight where we kind of just, throw him out there against the Wolves and lose. I think Fakhretdinov wins by decision, and I think it's pretty dominant. 30-27 for the Russian. Fakhretdinov goes on his way to victory, moving up the ranks again in the welterweight division. Let's go on to our next one, going back to the bantamweights here. Kang taking on Munin Gafurov. I am very surprised Gafurov's a favorite. He's 0-2 in the UFC, and he is a betting favorite against a guy in Kang who is, 8-4 in the UFC? Again, I know that doesn't mean everything, and you got to look at who Gafurov has fought so far in the promotion and compared to what Kang has been recently in the UFC. But I do find it interesting that's where the odds are at. Kang recently has strayed away from his, all the time grappling base. That's kind of how I first started knowing Kang was just of his grappling. And then again, it has been more and more recently, starting kind of with the Hani Yahya fight, in a fight where he knew he had the advantage on the feet. He ended up losing actually to Hani Yahya, but that's kind of where Kang started to just become more of a kickboxer in there, which is very interesting, right? He beats Dana Bakary in a straight striking fight, which at the time was very impressive. He beats Christian Quinones after that. He drops Quinones in the fight. He gets a takedown as well, but he submits him with a rear naked choke in the first round. It's a very good victory for Kang in that fight. And then in the last one, again, he loses to John Castaneda. It's in New York City. It's at Madison Square Garden. He loses it by decision. Castaneda just outstrikes him in every single round. Castaneda's the one pushing the pace in terms of the wrestling. It's just a tough fight for Kang when you look back at it. Now you get him versus Munin Gafurov, who's from Tajikistan. Yes, he's from Tajikistan, fighting now out of Fairfax, Virginia. But this is a guy who is 0-3 under the Zuffa banner. He's lost twice in the UFC, once to Chad Anheliger on the Contender Series. The losses in the UFC are to John Castaneda and Saeed Nurmagomedov. Yeah, they're not bad losses. They really aren't. But again, even a loss to Chad Anheliger, though, it makes you think. It makes you think about a lot of things. It truly does. Because a guy like Gafurov's supposed to beat Chad Anheliger. Chad Anheliger is not the best UFC fighter. He's just not. Okay, he's just not. And again, it's a split decision. It's a close fight, but Gafurov loses. He comes back, wins back-to-back fights in LFA, right? He goes in there, he wins the LFA Bantamweight Championship, then he loses to Castaneda, and then loses to Saeed Nurmagomedov. I'm surprised he's a favorite in this fight. I thought we could probably get him at plus money here, which kind of gives away the pick because I am taking Gafurov even though he's 0-2 in the UFC. I just think I'm going to kind of side towards him because of the guys he's fought so far and because Kang's 36. Sure, again, a lot of experience in the UFC, don't get me wrong, but 36 years of age, he's been around for a while. I think if Gafurov's able to implement his game, and which is tough because he's just been beat kind of at his own game so far in the UFC. Castaneda outboxed him and outgrappled him. He's going to have to go to the wrestling base here, and he's going to have to, again, just kind of lay on Kang this entire fight. That's what he tried to do in the Chan and Helliger fight. He got dropped in the Helliger fight too, but that's where he saw the most success, was in terms of him wrestling in that fight. And I understand Kang is somewhat dangerous off his back. He's got the jiu-jitsu skills. I get that. But we're going to have to trust that Gafurov's able to take Kang down and just kind of lay on him and just kind of get in the mindset of, I'm 0-2 in the UFC. I lost in the Contender Series. I have to win this fight to remain in the UFC and just go out there. And seriously, Mark DeCasey did this a lot when he needed wins in the UFC. Straight up said, let's wrestle. I'm going to lay on you. I don't care how boring it is. I need to stay in the promotion. And he did that up until the point where now he's signed with the PFL, obviously. But that's kind of the style and that's kind of the game plan that we need out of Mooney and Gafurov in this fight. And I am willing to think that he's going to implement something like that, right? Again, the odds are going to finish very close in this one. I would not be surprised if we see Kang as the favorite at the end of the week. I would not be surprised if you see this line shift even further in the direction of Mooney and Gafurov. I wouldn't be surprised either way. But again, on Tapology, currently, we've got Kang at 68% of voters picking him and 32% going with Gafurov. I can see it either way. I'm going to go with the Tapology underdog and the favorite and the betting favorite. And Mooney and Gafurov to win. Again, I understand, though, the case for Kang to pick up the victory. Okay, to the lightweight division. Nasrat Haqparast taking on Jared Gordon. Haqparast is a pretty sizable favorite here against Gordon. Obviously, don't get Haqparast, don't mistake him with, later on in this card, Kelvin Gastelum. But Haqparast will get Gordon in this fight. Jared Gordon, obviously, 20-6 professionally, coming off that win over Mark Madsen by knockout in the first round at UFC 295 in New York City. Huge win for the guy. Beat the former Olympic wrestler again, Mark Madsen. And that was a great win for Jared Gordon. And right, the guy got robbed against Paddy the Baddy, an absolute robbery back at UFC 282, Blachowicz on Goliath. Gordon won the fight. It was horrible, but they gave the nod to Paddy the Baddy, and Paddy the Baddy's going to get exposed when he fights Bobby Green next month in Manchester. Trust me, Bobby Green is going to melt that guy. Now, Bobby Green fought Jared Gordon after Jared Gordon fought Paddy the Baddy. Bobby Green finished him, but it was a headbutt. The fight got overturned to a no contest. Green, since then, again, has gone on to UFC 300 and win. And for Jared Gordon, he won on UFC 295, again, like we mentioned earlier, against Mark Madsen. Very good victory. Showed that, again, Jared Gordon's got the punching power. It was his first knockout victory in the UFC since his UFC debut back in 2017 on a undercard to Michael Chiesa and Kevin Lee. Again, it's been that long since Jared Gordon's been able to go out there and get a finish on the feet. Again, he was able to do that against Mark Madsen in that fight. He was able to do it by first round knockout, which, again, very good victory for him. We'll see what we get against him, though, and Nasrat Haqparast, because Haqparast is a more than willing striker. You saw his last fight against Jamie Mullarkey, knocked him out in the first round. Now, again, I'm not... beating Jamie Mullarkey in 2023 doesn't mean the most. It really doesn't, right? I should not have put a hat on. My hair is wet, but still. Mullarkey, again, beating that guy in 2023 is not the best accomplishment. It's not, right? He beat him by first round knockout. Before that, he beat Landon Quinones. He beat John McDessie before that, did Haqparast. It's been victories. The Haqparast fight, admittedly, was very close and closer than it probably should have been. I believe I was very close to picking Haqparast, or picking McDessie to win. I did actually pick McDessie to win that fight. I thought it was a close fight. I don't know. It could have gone either way. But again, Haqparast, he's been that all-action type of striker where he's more than willing just to strike and stand for 15 minutes. Again, the biggest example of that is a fight that he was a pretty big favorite in the Landon Quinones fight, a guy who lost on The Ultimate Fighter. Haqparast went in there and just outstruck him. Outstruck him 171 to 148 in that fight. You look at the Jamie Mullarkey fight after that, again, dropped him twice in the span of a minute and 44 seconds, and ended up winning the fight by knockout in the first round. So that's what we're getting out of Haqparast. Again, 3 straight wins before that. Losses to both Dan Hooker and Bobby Green, which are tough fights. Don't get me wrong. Again, Hooker went in there. Again, kind of what I was talking about with Medine Gafurov. Hooker needed a win, and he said, you know what, I'm just going to wrestle. And that's exactly what he did. He just straight up wrestled Nasrat Haqparast, and he ended up winning the fight by unanimous decision. And then Bobby Green went in there and just, just outboxed and boxed the brakes off of Nasrat Haqparast in that fight back at, 271? Yeah, over in Houston. Adesanya and Whittaker. I think, though, when we look at this fight, we're going to see a striking bout. And I'd be hard-pressed to pick against Nasrat Haqparast in a pure striking fight against Jared Gordon. Right? Like, yeah, Gordon showcased the power in his last fight. He showed that it's there, but I don't think that's going to really play its dividends in a fight against Nasrat Haqparast. And, like, again, we look at and Jared Gordon's, he beat Mark Madsen, who, yeah, hits hard, but he's a primary wrestler who's, again, just looking to get the fight on the ground. That's why, again, everything can kind of point to me for a Haqparast victory. I think Haqparast goes in there, and I just think he straight up just outstrikes Jared Gordon. I think we see a striking fight for as long as the fight lasts. I don't think we see a finish, but I just think from a pure striking perspective, Nasrat Haqparast he is the better striker, and we're going to take the Afghanistani fighter fighting out of Germany, but who also trains at TriStar, which is in Canada. We're taking Nasrat Haqparast to win. Training out of Montreal, Quebec, but also at the same time training out of Germany still. Yeah, give me Nasrat Haqparast to win this fight by unanimous decision. All right, starting off the main card, Shara Magomedov versus Zsoiton Lutterbach. This is an interesting fight because, again, Shara Magomedov, I feel like we were sold a little bit. I feel like we were sold just not entirely what Shara Magomedov was coming into the UFC. Now, he looks cool, right? He looks cool. He's got the Magomedov name. You're expecting, again, this guy is going to come and just completely maul guys. Again, the guy's name is Sharabutin Magomedov. Like that name alone, that just screams, this guy's a really good MMA fighter. And he's shown that, again, he's a kickboxer. He's a kickboxer training out of Moscow. He's got all these quick finishes. But it is interesting, though, when you look at his record, and, he's fighting a lot of guys that just don't have any, nothing on Tapology. It's just a lot of random dudes, right? His wrestling leaves a lot to be desired, and I mean a lot. Bruno Silva was able to take him down 3 times. The kickboxer Bruno Silva. Now, Zsoiton Lutterbach has been doing a lot of karate/kickboxing/boxing recently. This is a guy who's had this is going to be his 49th walk into a mixed martial arts cage. On top of that, he's had a bunch of kickboxing fights, a bunch of modified rules bouts, plus boxing. He has a fight against Dricus du Plessis. You go back, KSW 50, Dricus knocks him out in the second round. He's fought Hoosh Manfio before in the PFL at 155 pounds. This is 2021. He loses to the eventual champion Manfio won 2021. Yeah, the eventual champion that season, Manfio by split decision. And he loses to Clay Collard after that by split decision as well. Again, Collard, we're going to be talking about tomorrow night. He's in the main event of PFL 5. But right, he's fought decent guys. He fought Dricus at 185 pounds. I don't know how the guy made 155 against Hoosh Manfio. He missed weight when he fought Clay Collard. He weighed in at 159. But this guy's big. He's 6 feet tall. Again, I mean, hell, we have, Jose Johnson coming in there weighing, he's 125 pounds at 6 feet tall. Again, I am assuming that Asu Almbayev beat him. Again, I'm recording this before that card happened. But yeah, it's just I don't know. I saw Jose Johnson's calling out Pantoja already, and I don't know what we're doing there. But Lutterbach is huge for 155 pounds. Now, this is different. This is big difference. He's at 185 now, right? This is 30 pounds up from where he was fighting with the PFL. But Lutterbach has a ground game. He has it. It's just a matter of if he can get the wrestling going and if he can really take down Shara Magomedov. I think Lutterbach truly has a chance in this fight. I think this fight's a lot closer than some people are looking at it. Don't get me wrong. I'm taking Shara Magomedov to win. Do I think he gets a finish over Lutterbach? I don't know. Lutterbach has had, again, 48 professional fights. He's only been finished in 3 of them. 2 of them by knockout, 1 of them by submission. That's kind of difficult to pick a Shara Magomedov finish in this fight. I'm actually going to take Shara to win by decision. I think Lutterbach's going to give him a lot of trouble. This is a Brazilian-born fighter who trains now at Dusseldorf, Germany. And again, he's just had so much combat sport experience. This is a guy who, again, has been taking karate bouts. I believe he fought in karate combat, right? I think he did. Yeah, his last fight was a knockout victory in karate combat. He's got back-to-back first round knockout victories in karate combat. He's supposed to take on a former UFC name in Charlie Ontiveros in karate combat as well. Like, he's been very active in what he's been able to do, and I just don't think Shara Magomedov is able to find the chin. I don't think he's going to. I think Shara, again, when you look back at what the guy was outside the UFC, it's against a lot of no-name opponents. 23-9, Bruno Silva. I understand that's a UFC fighter, but still, like, again, I understand Bruno Silva's in the UFC, but, like, I'm just saying, like, the records, even including Bruno Silva, aren't great. 7-6, Kushal Vyas. You got a 21-5 fighter in RCC who's now 22-6. That's not the worst win. 16-4, but 27-21, 4-1, 0-0, 0-1. Like, again, they're odd wins. They kind of are. I still do think Shara wins. I just don't think Sharaputhin Magomedov is truly the guy we thought he was entering the UFC. I think he's going to get beat eventually. I think a very good wrestler is going to beat Sharaputhin, and I even think a better striker beats him as well. I think, again, if Lutterbach had a full camp, maybe he does have an even better chance of beating Magomedov in this one. I think Shara wins. I would not count Lutterbach out of this fight at all, but I do think Shara Magomedov is able to go out there and outstrike him. I don't think, again, Joyton is able to get him on the ground, and that's where I think Shara Magomedov wins. So give me the fighter coming out of Moscow and Shara Magomedov to win this fight by unanimous decision. We go on to our next one here of the main card. We have got, I don't really understand the placement of this one, but Mohamed Naimov taking on Melzik Baghdasaryan in the featherweight division. Again, Naimov, I kind of get the placement. Naimov, undefeated in the UFC, 3-0 for Melzik Baghdasaryan, 3-1 in the UFC for the Armenian fighter, again, who comes into this fight with a record of 8 wins and 2 losses. Baghdasaryan coming off a victory about 11 months ago against Tucker Lutz. Naimov coming off 3 straight wins, again, over the likes of Jamie Mullerkey, Nathaniel Wood, and Eric Silva, who had a leg injury in their fight on that fight night card over in Mexico, Moreno Royval 2. I wasn't the highest on Naimov coming into the UFC simply because before his first UFC fight, before his UFC debut, the guy had lost 2 of 5, which again isn't horrible, but like he lost to Colin Anglin. And Melzik Baghdasaryan made it look pretty easy against Colin Anglin in both of their UFC debuts back in 2021. So I'm not high on Anglin. I don't think anybody is. And Anglin beat Naimov, right? He kind of just dominated him. He beat him from pillar to post. Now, again, Naimov has improved since then, right? This is a guy, again, who did lose his next fight after losing to Anglin, but beats Andres Ponce. He beats Stik Mudiev by split decision on Tough Enough. He beats Dylan Schultz by head kick in the first round, then wins 3 in a row against Mullerkey by knockout, Wood against Wood by decision, and Eric Silva by TKO with the injury. The best win he has is Nathaniel Wood by far. That is a very meaningful victory that he got over in Abu Dhabi at UFC 294. That's a very good victory, right? For Melzik Baghdasaryan, the wins still do leave a lot to be desired. Again, there are over 3 guys who are not in the UFC anymore. Tucker Lutz is no longer a UFC name. He's 1-3 in the UFC. Joshua Kalibau is still in the UFC, obviously, coming off 2 straight losses, but Kalibau, again, submitted Baghdasaryan in the second round. And you look at his first 2 fights in the UFC, Colin Anglin, he beat Colin Anglin, but Colin Anglin no longer in the UFC. This is a guy who lost an ex-MMA 2 fights ago, just won his last fight against a 15-29 fighter earlier this month. And then he beat Bruno Souza in Madison Square Garden. Souza went 0-2 in the UFC. He just beat Wilson Heiss in Cage Warriors. He beat Teruto Ishihara. Like, again, he's beating decent guys, but he went 0-2 in the UFC with losses to Baghdasaryan and to Luis Saldana. I think off of that alone, we have to look at the strength of schedule and how these guys have performed. I think everything points to a Mohamed Naimov victory. Again, I wasn't the most impressed with the guy coming into the UFC, but since, again, we've seen him, this is a guy fighting at elevation up in Denver, Colorado. I'm going to take the Tajikistan fighter in Mohamed Naimov to go out here and win the fight. Just because, again, guys have been able to wrestle Melzik Baghdasaryan. Even on the Contender Series, when Baghdasaryan beat Dennis Bazooka was able to take him down. Colin Anglin took him down once, again, be it for not all that long, but still guys are able to get takedowns against him. Tucker Lutz landed 3 takedowns and had 6.5 minutes of control against Melzik Baghdasaryan in Baghdasaryan's last fight. I think everything points to a Mohamed Naimov victory here. I think he really grinds this fight out with his wrestling, and I think Naimov, again, will get it done by unanimous decision. Let's go on to our next one here. Kelvin Gastelum returns and he's taking on D-Rod, Daniel Rodriguez in the welterweight division. This is a very good fight. Kelvin Gastelum, though, is coming off that loss at Sean Brady, where Brady just kind of dominated him on the ground, and shout out to Brady. He's now getting his main event spot against Gilbert Burns later in the year. But again, when you really look at it, it's not a bad loss for Kelvin Gastelum at all. Again, beating Sean Brady's not easy. That guy's very good. And again, he is being gifted that top 5 opponent with the Gilbert Burns fight, likely, definitely, I would think, with a crowd in the main event. If I had to guess, maybe they do it somewhere. I don't know. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Brady's a Pennsylvania guy, right? I think he is. I would say Philly. They haven't gone to Philly in a while. I think Brady's a Pennsylvania guy. Is he? Yeah, he's a Philly guy. Renzo Gracie, obviously. So yeah, I'd expect that card to be in Philly. But anyways, Kelvin Gastelum, again, lost to Sean Brady. Again, it could have been worse, right? Like, Brady's not a bad fighter. He's only ever lost to Bilal Muhammad, who, you know, love or hate the guy, Bilal Muhammad's fighting for a world championship in his next fight. So say what you want about Bilal, but that's not a bad loss, losing to Bilal Muhammad. It's really not, right? At one point we thought it was. Right now it's really not. And we'll see if Bilal does become the world champion against Leon Edwards in July. But anyways, Gastelum loses to Brady. He beats Chris Curtis before that, which is a good victory. And then before that, again, he just fought really tough guys, did Gastelum. Cannonier, Whittaker, Hermanson, Till. You got the win over Ian Heinisch jammed in between all those. But Gastelum's just taking on these really tough fighters, which, again, tough fighters. Nothing against Daniel Rodriguez. He's not on those guys' level. He's just not. Gastelum has been fighting the guys at the pinnacle of the sport. Seriously. He's been fighting the top guys at 185 pounds. He's gone down to 170 to fight Sean Brady. He's back down at 70, and that's another, again, top 10 guy. No disrespect to Daniel Rodriguez, but he is not at the level of Sean Brady. And again, I understand it's different weight classes, but still, even Chris Curtis, Jared Cannonier, Robert Whittaker, at the time Jack Hermanson, at the time Darren Till, and obviously Israel Adesanya. That's the losing streak for Gastelum, right? He's won 2 out of his last 8 fights. I think I did that right. It's crazy. It is crazy. 2 out of his last, I think it's 2 out of the last 8 he's lost. Or he's won. He's only won 2 out of 8, which is crazy. But again, these are against the top guys in the weight class. No disrespect to Daniel Rodriguez, he's not that. D-Rod's coming off 2 straight losses. He's coming off a Darce choke loss to Neil Magny. He's coming off a knockout loss, I believe it was in Charlotte, against Ian Machado Gary, again in the first round, right? I think it's a tough fight for D-Rod because, again, Kelvin Gastelum is going to be able to mix it up everywhere against him. If if Kelvin wants to strike, he can strike. If he wants to grapple, he can grapple. The fight that really looked good for me with Kelvin Gastelum was the win over Chris Curtis. Again, he got in his face the entire fight. He was always, again, pushing the pace against Chris Curtis. And again, Chris Curtis is not the best loser of a fight. Like, he will not take that loss in the best way. I like Chris Curtis personally, but again, he doesn't take losing all that well, which was kind of interesting as the fight ended. But right, like, Gastelum, again, it got in Curtis's face and really pressured him. He can do the same exact thing to Daniel Rodriguez. I don't think Daniel Rodriguez can outbox him. I don't think so. I still think Kelvin is a better boxer, but also the biggest pathway to victory is in the grappling, is in the wrestling. Kelvin Gastelum has that wrestling base. Now, given he doesn't always go to that, right? Recently, it has been, again, even in his main events, right? Like, Whittaker, he looked to strike a lot, but even like Whittaker was the better wrestler in that fight, which is weird. But in the Cannonier fight, straight striking bout. Chris Curtis fight, straight striking. Brady got the better of him in the wrestling in their last fight. But again, Kelvin Gastelum will get the better of Daniel Rodriguez in terms of the wrestling with this matchup. He is the better wrestler between him and Daniel Rodriguez, and that's where I truly think Kelvin Gastelum can win. Not to mention, again, I think the striking is there. Don't get me wrong. I think he has the pathways to win on the feet. So again, like I mentioned earlier with our pick, very early in the video with Gadzhiyasulov, this is kind of the same thing too. I think there's multiple ways Kelvin Gastelum can win. He can either win with the striking, and he can also win with the grappling as well. Another thing you got to consider for Syndicate MMA Zone and Daniel Rodriguez is that he's 37 years old. He's getting up there in age. Again, this is kind of the time where guys start to fall off, at least in terms of, again, just in terms of, being in your physical peak, at your physical best. Something always to keep in mind. Kelvin Gastelum, it seems like he's been fighting forever. Again, when I first really started getting in MMA, Kelvin Gastelum was on the Ultimate Fighter. That's the first Ultimate Fighter season I remember watching, was Jones Sonnen And Kelvin Gastelum, Uriah Hall were the two big stars on the season. Obviously, Uriah Hall was the guy. I'll never forget when Chael Sonnen told Uriah Hall after he beat, God, what was that guy's name? I forget, Bubba Chandler was his name, I don't remember. He knocked the guy out in the first round in like 10 seconds, and Chael Sonnen goes up to Uriah Hall and says, "You're a contender." Not just in the UFC, but for the title, which was crazy. That was the craziest thing. Like, even looking back on it, it's crazy. It's crazy, too, that he was talking about him being a contender for Anderson Silva, and Uriah Hall's last UFC fight was Anderson Silva, and now Chael Sonnen's boxing Anderson Silva, which is happening tomorrow for me, but by the time this video is out, you'll, of course, know. I mean, no doubt about it. Chael definitely, Chael's going to remain undefeated and undisputed with that win over Anderson. He's going to go kick George Masvidal's ass later this year. But anyways, Kelvin Gastelum, again, was on that season The Ultimate Fighter. He's been around for that long. Uriah Hall is no longer in the UFC. He's boxing guys like Le'Veon Bell. Guys, Kelvin Gastelum's only 32 years old. He's only 32. He's been around for a while, but he's still, again, at 32 years of age. D-Rod's 5 years older. I think Gastelum, again, is still quicker. I think he's still got a lot left in the tank, and I think Kelvin Gastelum can either wrestle Daniel Rodriguez to victory, he can either mix it up, wrestle, or just straight up go strike with D-Rod, which I think is the worst thing he could do, but I still think he could win. So give me Kelvin Gastelum. I really don't see him losing this fight. Again, Gastelum's been fighting the best of the best, and again, no disrespect to D-Rod, but he's not just on that level. I think Gastelum wins this fight by decision. To our next one, Johnny Walker versus Volkan Oezdemir here on this featured bout in the light heavyweight division. Johnny Walker is back after his main event loss in the Apex against Magomedov Ankalaev, the first card of 2023. Tough bout for him. He got knocked down the second round. Didn't watch the fight live, but again, I've rewatched it obviously since then. I was at a Chicago Blackhawks game. I remember when that fight happened. But yeah, Ankalaev knocks him out in the second round. It is what it is. Johnny Walker, again, kind of just always gets knocked down in the most cartoonish fashion. But that's kind of been the thing with Johnny Walker, right? Like, he beats these ranked number 8 and below guys, I'll say. Anyone outside the top 8, I think Johnny Walker handles. But once you get to the elite of the weight class, and that's when Johnny Walker really does struggle. I don't think Volkan Oezdemir is truly in the elite of the weight class right now. Former UFC title challenger, something that gets forgotten a lot. He fought DC for the belt, right? The fight before Daniel Cormier had against Stipe Miocic, right? That was Volkan Oezdemir in Boston. It was a co-main, so that's why I didn't get much attention. It was under Ngannou. Miocic won. But Oezdemir's fought for a world title before. And again, it kind of goes with my thing with Johnny Walker. Outside the top 8, he seems to win. Volkan Oezdemir is number 9, right? Oezdemir is coming off his victory against Bogdan Guskov, where he submitted him in the first round. I always thought that was weird matchmaking because Guskov was coming into the UFC and immediately being inserted in a fight against Oezdemir, who's in the top 10. Oezdemir handled him. I know, again, Oezdemir is coming off that loss to Nikita Krylov by decision. I mentioned this a long time ago, probably like a month ago, about Nikita Krylov. Is the guy alive? I don't know. Like, I got mixed answers last time I asked that question. That's a genuine question. I'm just asking you, watching this video. I don't know if Nikita Krylov's alive. I don't know what's going on. The Russia-Ukraine thing, I don't know. But, like, again, we have not heard from Nikita Krylov in a very long time. Who knows what's going on? But Oezdemir loses to Krylov, right? But he beats Bogdan Guskov, which, again, I thought was weird because Guskov coming into the UFC taking on a guy like Oezdemir. Now, again, Guskov's won back-to-back fights, right? He's coming off the Ryan Spann win. Hopefully, he gets Anthony Smith. I understand Anthony Smith is being booked, and he's going to fight Carlos Ulberg on International Fight Week. But assuming he loses to Ulberg, then just give him the Bogdan Guskov fight, right? If we want to see that fight, it would be even funnier if that was an Apex main event. But still, right? Like, Oezdemir beats Guskov. He's got the loss to Krylov, the winner of Paul Craig, back-to-back losses in tough bouts, Magomedov Ankalaev, Yuri Prochazka, but beats Rakic before that by split decision back in 2019. Oezdemir is just not, he's 34, which isn't that old, but he's not, the same guy he once was. He went on that little skid. I just think Johnny Walker's better. Johnny Walker hits very hard, and I think Johnny Walker's going to give Oezdemir a lot of problems on the feet. That's just kind of, again, where I see this fight taking place. I don't really see it hitting the mat, even though, yeah, Oezdemir did go in there and, he did put the submission, put the hooks on, and again, got the tap out against Bogdan Guskov. I don't necessarily think he gets that against Johnny Walker. I don't think he does. I think you see more of a striking fight. Again, we've seen Oezdemir's chin cracked before, given it was against the former champion Yuri Prochazka in Prochazka's UFC debut. But still, I think Johnny Walker, again, he's an unconventional type striker. He's going to offer a lot of different looks against Oezdemir in this fight. And I think he's going to give Oezdemir a lot of problems when you look at this fight from a striking perspective. I think Walker does win. And I think he does get it done in the first round by knockout. When you look at the rest of the division, right, like, again, Johnny Walker, and he has looked better, I would say, since he's moved to SBG Ireland. I know it's been a while now, but still, that 3-fight winning streak where he beat Kuche Laba, beat Paul Craig, and beat Anthony Smith, he looked very good in that win streak. I feel like Oezdemir is just another one of these guys along the line for him that he can just beat. And now when you look at the rankings, right, Johnny Walker ranked at number 7, right? You don't know what's going on with Kirillov. The easiest fight now is Johnny Walker, Alexander Rakic. It's just staring right at you in the face. Rakic coming off the loss to Parashka is ranked number 5. Walker can, I don't know if he can jump Kirillov because he's lost to Kirillov before, but that would be the fight next. It'd be Walker, Rakic, I would think. Later this year, obviously, when Rakic is ready to come back from his knockout loss against Parashka, I think it makes all the sense in the world, right? Again, Johnny Walker was arguably a fight away from the belt in his last fight. If he beat Ankalaev, the UFC would be calling him to fight Pereira this week to replace Conor. Seriously, they would. Because again, UFC always had their vision with Johnny Walker. At one point in time, they thought he was the guy to beat John Jones. I watched, I think it was Dana with Pat McAfee. He was talking about Johnny Walker fighting Corey Anderson at MSG, and Dana White was hyping up Johnny Walker to Donald Trump and told him, this is the guy. This is going to be our next big star. And he sat there with Trump and watched Johnny Walker lose, and Trump gave him crap for it because that was supposed to be his guy. I think that kind of stays with Dana White, and Dana White's still mad Johnny Walker's not his guy. Trust me, if Walker was to beat Ankalaev, he'd be fighting for the belt at this point. They've been wanting Walker to fight for the belt. Maybe he will someday, but this is the step towards that direction if he can beat Oezdemir. Give me Johnny Walker, though, to beat Volkov Oezdemir. He'll get it done by first round knockout. All right, co-main event, Sergey Pavlovich taking on Alexander Volkov. Now, I'm going to start this prediction off by reading a quote that Alexander Volkov said when this fight was first announced. Now, originally, Alexander Volkov was supposed to fight Zhaitan Almeida at UFC 302 in Newark, New Jersey, at the Prudential Center. Now, Zhaitan Almeida on that card won on the undercard against Alexander Romanov. He ended up winning the fight by first round submission. It looks like Almeida, with the booking of Sergey Spivak and Marcin Tybura 2 in August, it looks like that Zhaitan Almeida will actually get Cyril Gane in Paris, France. I'm very excited for that fight because, again, one of two things going to happen in that fight. Either Almeida submits him in the first round, or Cyril Gane knocks him out in the first round. There's, or maybe it takes a little time, but still, there is no other way about that fight. Anyways, Volkov said originally when this fight was announced with Pavlovich, I believe he also said that he didn't know this fight was happening, that the UFC kind of just announced this before it was signed, but he says that he hasn't won a single round of sparring against Sergey Pavlovich. He says, quote, Pavlovich hits hard. It was very difficult to work with him. I don't think I won a single round against him. Every blow my legs were giving away. Now, I don't know if that's gamesmanship or not. I don't know. But if that is a real quote, or I know it's real, but I don't know if that really is a representation of what happened when those two were sparring where I assume Russia, that's not good. A lot of people thought this fight wasn't actually going to happen when it was announced because, again, Volkov was taken aback by it, that the fight actually got, that it was scheduled, and also that these guys have trained together before. But yeah, that quote doesn't sound great if you're picking Alexander Volkov. Again, sorry if this gives the pick away right now, I'm going to talk about it, but why wouldn't I take Sergey Pavlovich then? Right? I'm taking Sergey Pavlovich to knock out Volkov in the first round, and I get it. Volkov has a decent chin. He's only been knocked out a couple times. He's only been knocked out twice. And the only time in the UFC he's been finished was against Derek Lewis with 10 seconds left at 229 on the Khabib-Conor undercard. Before that, you got to look all the way back to his loss against Vitaly Minakov in Bellator, right? That was a long time ago. Minakov knocked him out back in 2013 for the championship. Volkov lost the belt that way. But that's the only 2 times he's ever been knocked out. Now, Pavlovich has scary power, though. This guy has got power that is unheard of for the weight class. Don't look at the loss to Tom Aspinall and forget how good Sergey Pavlovich is. I think there's ways to beat this guy. I think there is. I think Volkov has the skills to do it. But simply the quote that Volkov says and just the fact that these guys have trained together before, and it looks like Pavlovich has won in those training sessions too. Seriously, I'd be hard pressed to find anyone who'd pick Volkov knowing all of this. Why wouldn't we take Pavlovich here? Again, Volkov saying his legs were fried after Pavlovich again connected. Couldn't stay up. Because again, Pavlovich hits very hard. Don't take the loss to Aspinall, don't take that too much in a negative light, because again, I think Tom Aspinall beats every heavyweight in the world, with the exception of John Jones. I still think Jones would beat Aspinall. I know it's a very controversial take. I would pick John Jones right now. We haven't seen those guys in a minute, right? But right now, I take John Jones in a fight to beat Tom Aspinall. Again, neither of those guys have fought. John Jones has fought a very long time, longer time than Aspinall, but I still think Jones would win. I think. That might change when I see Aspinall against Blades and when I see Jones against Stipe. I don't know if they're ever going to fight. And again, I feel like we're kind of just assuming Aspinall is going to be Blades, but that is no guarantee. Curtis Blades is coming to win that fight, that rematch. He's looking to be 2-0 against Aspinall, obviously. And that would definitely throw a wrench in everything, though, if Blades went on to beat Aspinall. But don't take a loss to Tom Aspinall with Pavlovich all that harshly. Again, a lot of guys lose to Aspinall. Aspinall's got crisp boxing. Again, look at the head movement Aspinall uses when Pavlovich is trying to push forward. The guy's very good. And again, we're talking about Curtis Blades. Don't count him out. He's fighting Aspinall in the rematch for the interim belt. Well, Curtis Blades got manhandled by Sergey Pavlovich. Pavlovich melted him and knocked him out in 3 minutes. That's by far his best performance to date. Tai Tuivasa knocked him out in 54 seconds. Derek Lewis knocked him out in 55 seconds. Knocked out Shamila Durakimov in the first round. That's been his second run, essentially, in the UFC, even though he never left. But that's just kind of been his run so far. The guy's very good, Pavlovich is. He hits very damn hard, too. The one knock on him is his wrestling game. And we didn't get to see it in the Curtis Blades fight. Blades attempted one takedown. It was a half-hearted takedown. He really didn't fully commit to the shot. That's where I'd be interested to see him really get tested. Volkov has the wrestling. Again, he can do it. I just don't know if he's going to be able to get it off in this fight. I don't think it's going to happen. Volkov can wrestle. It's not, again, his primary thing. Obviously, Drago's more of a striker. He's more of a boxer. But he can implement it. I think you're going to see, though, primarily a striking bout. In a striking fight, again, we have the quote from Volkov. And again, even without that quote from Volkov, I would still take Sergey Pavlovich to go out here and win this fight. It's the power and it's just the striking as a whole, too. The guy hits very hard, and it's hard to beat a guy like that. Volkov will have a height advantage. He'll be 4 inches taller than Sergey, but Sergey at the same time will have a 4-inch reach advantage at the same exact time. So again, Volkov's going to have 4 inches on him on height, but again, the reach is going to be 4 inches to the advantage of Sergey Pavlovich. I think Pavlovich does go out here and win this fight again. I think it's a primary striking fight, and I do just think he goes in there and just outboxes Alexander Volkov this entire fight until it does end. Again, I think Pavlovich will land on the button, and he will knock out Alexander Volkov in the first round. The one thing I will bring up, I don't think it's going to happen, but if I'm just going to say it now, so if it happens, I can say I told you so. If these guys have trained together, there's a chance this turns into a sparring match and nothing really happens. I'm just throwing it out there. There is a slight chance that could happen. I hope for all of our sake it doesn't. But I'm telling you, there is a possibility that it could happen, and it's just a boring Pavlovich decision. I'm throwing that out there that is a possibility that could happen. I still think Pavlovich wins by first round knockout, but I'm just saying, don't be entirely surprised if that is the result of this fight. Though we are taking Sergey Pavlovich, though, to win this fight by first round knockout. As we now move on to the main event, Robert the Reaper Whittaker, the former world champion, on short notice takes on Ikram Aliskerov. And Dana White said it when he announced this fight. They asked everyone in the top 10 to fight Ikram Aliskerov. Everybody turned it down except for Whittaker. Now, Whittaker needed a fight for this card because Hamzat was out anyway, but this is great. We are going to find out how good Ikram Aliskerov is truly. Now, when Ikram Aliskerov last week, you can watch this on the Perez Tyra video I made last week, when he's supposed to take on Antonio Tricoli, who's got a lot of weird history too. Tricoli does. It was kind of weird that he was in the spot that spot in the first place. But anyways, when he was taking on Antonio Tricoli, I thought it was so weird because Aliskerov at one point comes into the UFC, wins the Contender Series, beats Phil Haas by knockout in the first round in New Jersey on the pay-per-view card, on the undercard, but still, is then immediately booked against Paulo Costa. The fight falls through because both of the guys are rebooked. Costa is booked against, who was he booked against? Rockhold, right? Was that Rockhold? No, it was after the Rockhold fight. He was booked against Hamzat. Fight never happened, right? Shocking. But still, he was booked against, again, Aliskerov was booked against Paulo Costa, fight fell through, then booked against Nasruddin Imavov. Imavov pulls out of the fight, And then he beats Warlley Alves by first round knockout, and we haven't seen him fight since. Booked against Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. Aliskerov withdraws. Booked against Andrea Muniz on that last card. Muniz withdraws. Then against Aliskerov, against Tricoli, Aliskerov's rebooked. So here we are. He's only fought 2 UFC fights, and one's against an old Warlley Alves, and the other one's against a guy who has the capability of being a good fighter in Phil Hawes, but unfortunately just doesn't have a chin. That's just the truth about Phil Hawes. He's talented, but again, the chin just isn't there. So you go from fighting Warlley Alves, who's old, who again is 30, well, he's only 33, but he's been around for a very long time. He's on a 4-fight losing streak. He lost to Jeremiah Wells, Nicholas Dalby, Ikram Aliskerov, and Abus Magomedov in his last fight. You go from fighting that guy to fighting the Reaper, Robert Whittaker. That's difficult. And I get people say Whittaker isn't the same guy he used to be. I don't think he is either. I think, again, Whittaker has been in so many wars. He's been in so many close and tough fights. Yeah, Whittaker's not the guy that he was when he was the world champion. He's not, but he's still very talented. I understand that you look at the fight against Paulo Costa where he gets rocked at the end of the first round of that fight in Anaheim, sure, but he comes back and he wins the next 2 rounds and, again, looks very good on the feet in doing so. And yeah, he loses to Dricus du Plessis, but damn it, Dricus du Plessis is the world champion right now. He lost Adesanya in the rematch in a fight that he arguably won. Still, though, Robert Whittaker's been fighting in the UFC for 12 years. Other than the 2 losses in 2013 and 2014, respectively, to Court McGee and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, his only losses are to Israel Adesanya twice and the current world champion Dricus du Plessis. Other than that, Robert Whittaker has beat everybody. And now he's fighting an unranked guy, Ikram Aliskerov, who, again, we are going to truly find out how good Ikram Aliskerov is come Saturday in Saudi Arabia. We're going to find out how good he is. I just don't think he's on Whittaker's level. How does Ikram when he knocks Whittaker out? I think Whittaker's too good on the feet. I think, again, I don't think Aliskerov's going to be able to catch him with anything big because I think, again, Whittaker's going to be able to get out the way of him. I understand he got caught with the big shot by Costa. He's been caught before by Izzy. Dricus caught him on that, glancing punch coming in. But I just don't think Aliskerov has the skills to beat him. And I don't think, again, Aliskerov's going to be able to bully him on the ground. I like Rob's defensive wrestling enough. And he's been training for Khamzat this entire time too. Again, Whittaker striking, that's all he knows. That's his game. Again, that's what Rob is used to. And the difference that he was going to find in a Khamzat Chimaev fight was the pressure and the pace that Chimaev brings with his wrestling. And again, that was a whole different thing. I was truly undecided who I was going to pick for that fight. I was leaning Khamzat, but then I was thinking, maybe Rob can get it done if he can get Khamzat out of those first 2 rounds, especially in a 5-round environment that Khamzat's never been in. I think, again, he was booked in a 5-round fight against Kevin Holland a long time ago, but again, he's never made it past the 3rd round, right? So we've never seen Khamzat in that spot, and I was thinking, okay, maybe Whittaker could get him past that, and he could really give him trouble because, again, Rob's going to be there in the 4th round, and Rob's still going to be, again, that same fighter in the 3rd, 4th, and the 5th that he was in the 1st and the 2nd. Now, again, we don't have to worry about that now. That it's Robert Whittaker and Ikram Aliskerov instead. What we do have to worry about with Rob is him getting taken down and him dealing with the jiu-jitsu and the sambo game of Ikram Aliskerov and the punching power of Aliskerov as well. I think he's able to avoid all of that, really. And I think Rob eventually will get Aliskerov out of there. I'm taking Robert Whittaker to win the fight by 4th round TKO. I think, again, Aliskerov has not been in this environment before. And when you get into a fight with a guy like Robert Whittaker, he is going to drown you eventually. And he's going to give you hell and he's going to give you problems. I think Rob's striking game is too good for Aliskerov. Aliskerov has not been in this 25-minute environment in a main event like this, fighting 5 rounds. The last time we saw Ikram Aliskerov on a guy of Robert Whittaker's caliber, it was Khamzat Chimaev back in 2019 in Brave, and Khamzat knocked him out in the 1st round. I'm not saying either of those guys are the same fighters that they were back then, nor am I saying, again, Whittaker is fighting that same version of Aliskerov that fought Khamzat Chimaev, and nor am I saying that Robert Whittaker is going to do the same exact thing to Aliskerov that Khamzat did back in 2019. But I'm saying is that Whittaker has the striking advantage in this fight. He might not have the punching power advantage, but still as a technical striker and as an all-around striking game, Robert Whittaker is better than Ikram Aliskerov. He just is. The wrestling and the sambo is where this fight does get a little bit interesting, but I do think Rob is good enough to remain on his feet. He's good enough to keep the fight standing, and I just don't think Aliskerov's able to easily replicate that throughout the course of 25 minutes. Sure, you can do that in the first round, you can do that in the second round, but taking this fight on short notice, I understand he was training for Tricoli, I understand he was in camp, but he was training for 15 minutes. Now you're in there with a world-class champion-level fighter in Robert Whittaker for 25 minutes. That's not Antonio Tricoli. Tricoli shouldn't even be in the UFC. It's a huge step up, and I just don't think Aliskerov is ready for that, especially just on 2 weeks' notice. I'm taking the Reaper to win the fight, and again, we are taking Robert Whittaker to beat Ikram Aliskerov by 4th round TKO. He is eventually just going to drown Aliskerov, and it's going to be an accumulation of damage that Robert Whittaker eventually picks up the victory and beats the guy nobody wants to fight in Aliskerov. Give me Robert Whittaker again by 4th round TKO. A win for Aliskerov would do wonders for his career. Again, he would literally jump up to number 3 in the weight class. But here we go. I do this all the time, and I talk about it all the time. This is how I match up the middleweight division. Unfortunately, it is a given. Dricus du Plessis is going to fight Israel Adesanya in August in Perth at UFC 305. It's ridiculous. The fight should be du Plessis versus Strickland in the rematch. Again, I feel like a broken record saying this, but I'll say it one more time. Israel Adesanya, and this isn't his first loss of the belt. It's the second time he's lost the belt. He's 1-2 in his last 3 fights. He never defended the belt in his second reign. He got his rematch from his original title reign, which made sense, but again, getting 2 immediate rematches is ridiculous, especially because he never defended the belt in his second reign. He lost 49-46, 50-45, however you want to see it, against Sean Strickland, and Strickland then went on to defend his belt against Dricus du Plessis in a very close fight that people thought arguably he may have won. I thought du Plessis won, but still I understand the case for Strickland, and I understand it's 3-2 either way you see it. Strickland instead has to go and fight another fight that he wins, and still has to wait for du Plessis to fight Adesanya, a guy that he beat 4 rounds to 1. And considering the guy who has the belt, he had a razor-thin split decision against. It's so ridiculous. It's so insanely horrible. It's dog crap. Now, that wasn't a dog joke with Adesanya, even though you can take it as you want. Now, Adesanya, unfortunately, is going to have to fight du Plessis. Strickland's going to wait for the winner. Imavov, I think, is going to rematch Jared Cannonier. I think that's what's going to happen. And we kind of just get stuck with Robert Whittaker. Unfortunately, I think Robert Whittaker is going to get rebooked against Chimaev. Unless the UFC... Maybe we get Whittaker Strickland. Now that Khamzat's out the picture for now. Maybe we do. If Aliskerov wins, he can fight down the rankings. It's not that big of a problem if Aliskerov wins. Seriously. If Aliskerov wins, all right, go fight Brendan Allen. Go fight Marvin Vettori. Go fight Roman Dolidze. That won't happen. But seriously, they'll tell him, go fight Vettori or Brendan Allen. That's your fight. Jared Cannonier, I think, will get the rematch with Imavov in Paris, France, and the co-main event should be 5 rounds behind Almeida and Gane. And Benoit Saint-Denis should be on that card too. It should be a very good card. I'm not sure. It probably won't be on it. But still, right, like that should happen. Again, I think they should grant Jared that rematch. Again, it's now or never for the Jared Cannonier title hopes, right? The run has to go right now, and he's got to get that rematch against Imavov if he ever wants to touch the belt ever. So again, it makes it a lot easier if Aliskerov wins. I don't think he will, but if he does, you can easily just book him against Allen or Vettori. If Whittaker wins, I don't know if Strickland would take it, but the UFC has to offer Strickland a bag to go fight Robert Whittaker as the co-main event of Adesanya du Plessis. Even though the much more easier thing to do is Adesanya Whittaker 3 in the co-main event and du Plessis Strickland in the main event. I pray that happens. It won't. But if I was running the UFC, that's what I'd do. You still get the pay-per-view and the attraction of Adesanya being on the card. He's just not fighting for the belt. And if he beats Whittaker for a 3rd time, then he deserves the title shot. But they're going to do Adesanya du Plessis, and I don't know what they're going to do with Strickland and Whittaker. But for this pick in particular, we are taking the Reaper, Robert Whittaker, to beat Ikram Aliskerov by 4th round TKO. And folks, thank y'all for watching our UFC Fight Night Whittaker versus Aliskerov predictions from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I believe that this one is in Riyadh. I don't even know how to pronounce that, I'll be honest with you. Remember, WWE used to go there all the time. I think they still do. I don't know. I watch AEW now. But anyways, thank y'all for watching. Make sure that subscribe button down below for more. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the video. We'll be back for PFL tomorrow. And I forgot to mention this in the opening to the video as well. We've got Bellator this week too. Bellator Champion Series, Dublin, Ireland. In the main event, you have got Jason Jackson taking on Ramazan Kurmagomedov for the welterweight belt, and the debut in Bellator for Paul Hughes taking on Bobby King in the co-main event. So stay tuned for that. We've got PFL coming at you tomorrow, as well as Bellator double upload tomorrow with the MMA picks. Folks, thank you for watching. Make sure that subscribe button down below for more. Make sure you leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Make sure to comment if you do disagree with any of the picks. Folks, thank you for watching, and Mamba forever.